Julian stood in the lengthy check-in line at the airport, his gaze fixed on the stunning profile of his lovely wife, Isabella. She had one of those rare profiles that was even more captivating than her full face. His love for her went beyond affection. He adored her deeply. After searching for a long time, he found her worth every second of that wait. Her boyish hairstyle, dainty button nose, and sculpted lips made him smile every time he saw her. "What's so amusing, Jules?" Isabella asked, her voice soft and her head still turned away. "It's nothing, Bella." "You're just amazing," he said proudly, admiring her long, toned legs that her yoga pants showcased so well. Their relationship had definitely had its share of highs and lows. Julian could be a tough nut to crack. He held strong principles and had high moral standards that not many could meet. Bella was the only one who matched his expectations. She was a complex individual herself, an uncompromising vegan, a minimalist, an environmentalist, and a dedicated shelter volunteer. It's fair to say that if they hadn't found each other, they might have stayed single for a long time. They were introduced 2 years ago by their mutual friend, Alice, who had worked with Bella in the legal department of a major advertising agency for a decade. Alice and Julian had a brief fling, and though the chemistry was undeniable, their differing worldviews and Julian's refusal to compromise made a lasting relationship nearly impossible. Despite that, they remained good friends. Introducing Julian to Bella was easy for Alice, given their history. Julian and Bella weren't a perfect match. He was a vegetarian, not a vegan. He leaned right politically, and she was left. He adored dogs, while she was a cat lover. His Belgian shepherd didn't get along with her ginger cat. Julian preferred solitude, whereas Bella thrived on socializing, parties, and gatherings. Despite these differences, their shared interests helped bridge the gap, and love bloomed quickly. 10 months after their first date, they married. In 2 weeks, they would celebrate their first wedding anniversary. Bella had stopped using birth control a month ago. They were ready to start a family. Julian worked as a department manager at a large security company, a job he landed through a former Army commander. His military service was shrouded in secrecy, but whatever he did it well. He left the service at 27 due to the numerous losses he endured. Nonetheless, his commanders and connections were eager to help him transition to civilian life, though he occasionally had to report for active reserve duty, usually just a few days, a few times a year. His friends and family had learned not to pry. Bella's upcoming trip was tied to her job and was a much-anticipated event. Her company organized an annual 4-day, 3-night vacation at an all-inclusive resort for employees and their spouses. With round-the-clock free alcohol, non-stop parties with DJs, stand-up shows, small island tours, and special attractions, the company spared no expense. Julian's smile faded when his phone rang. He saw an ID number he didn't recognize. "Don't answer," Bella screamed in a panicked voice. Despite her protest, Julian grimaced, shook his head, and answered. Yes, I understand. I'm on my way." "No," Bella said firmly. "I'm really sorry, Bella whispered sincerely. "I know I have to go, but please, have fun for both of us, okay?" Bella nodded, looking visibly downcast. He gave her a quick kiss, turned, and left the terminal. As he walked away, Bella's gaze followed him longingly until Alice's hand gently touched her shoulder. "We're going to have an amazing time," Alice assured her best friend. "From now on, you're stuck with me." The flight and drive to the resort were quick, and check-in was smooth. Thankfully, Alice and her hotel roommate, Maya, had a room not far from Bella's. Bella's breath was taken away by the breathtaking view of the deep blue bay visible from her room's balcony. The resort's rooms were arranged in rows on a hillside descending to the beach, where all the restaurants, bars, clubs, and sports facilities were located. Luckily, Alice and Bella's row wasn't too high up, so the climb back up wouldn't be too taxing. After a quick shower and a change of clothes, Bella joined her friends for lunch in the dining room before heading to the bar. They were excited and full of energy when they returned to Alice and Maya's room. Leo and Sam, the young copywriters from the adjacent room, burst in with playful grins. Leo pulled out a large joint and asked if they were up for a celebration. The girls giggled and eagerly agreed. "Where did you get this?" Alice asked, surprised. "The employee who brought our luggage asked if we needed anything else," Leo replied with a smirk. "This is the vibe for the whole time we're here," Sam said, setting up a portable speaker and connecting it to his phone while Leo lit the joint. He took a long drag and then passed it to Bella. As Bella exhaled, melodic techno music began to play from the speaker. A pleasant dizziness quickly took hold of Bella. An unbidden thought crossed her mind: if Jules were here, I wouldn't be sitting in this room with my friends, soaking in the beauty of the grass. Jules had strong feelings about alcohol and was quite rigid about it. He hated losing control. Bella sighed, wishing he could just loosen up a bit. She passed the joint to Alice, giving an approving nod as if to say it was top-notch. Before long, they were all chatting away, laughing and giggling. Well, almost all of them. While most people become more talkative after smoking, Bella usually retreated into herself. Adding alcohol to the mix made her even quieter and more withdrawn. She sank into a chair, eyes half closed, gently swaying to the music and savoring the soothing sensation that flowed through her body. Sam went to his room and returned with bottles of vodka, lemon juice, and disposable cups he had bought duty-free. Alice made sure Bella got her drink in a proper glass since Bella refused to use plastic. After a toast, they began to sway slowly to the relaxing music, kicking off their vacation on a high note. Later that evening, a group of 5 gathered around a communal table for dinner. Bella and Leo were lost in each other, exchanging flirtatious glances and smiles. When their attention remained solely on each other at the bar, Alice felt they were neglecting the rest of the group. Bella was getting ready for the beach party in her room when Alice burst in. "Care to explain what's going on between you two?" Alice asked bluntly. "Nothing much, really," Bella replied, slightly embarrassed. "It's just nice to get some male attention for a change. Nobody dares even look at me when Jules is around. His mere presence is intimidating." "Nothing?" Alice questioned, raising an eyebrow skeptically. "I don't mean to sound harsh," Bella said, "but I'm actually relieved Jules isn't here. He's always so tense, even when he's pretending to be laid back. It stresses me out. It's nice to feel free and have some fun. If you were here, I wouldn't be hanging out with you guys or indulging in smoking or drinking more than a glass of wine. He's so serious and cautious that it's boring. For instance, at restaurants, he always sits with his back to the wall, scanning the entrances non-stop. He thinks I don't notice, but even when he's supposedly talking to me, he's checking out other customers and people outside." "Well, tonight Leo is giving me all his attention," Bella continued. "Leo's not caught up in this game of agents and spies." "It's not just a game," Alice said sternly. "Jules's behavior is because there's a risk someone might be following him. I get that, but he's not here now. He left, and I'm on my own. I haven't had a chance to truly relax in 2 years, and I'm going to enjoy every moment of it. Just be careful, okay?" "Of course." Later that evening, Bella returned to Alice's room. The muffled sounds from the beach were audible. She wasn't surprised to find Leo and Sam by the coffee table, sipping from their cups and smoking weed. Their jaws dropped when they saw her. She wore a short black dress with straps that left little to the imagination. The 2 stoned men stared at her, practically drooling. Bella heard noises coming from the bathroom where Alice and Maya were getting ready. Leo offered her a drink and a joint. When Alice and Maya finally emerged, Leo and Sam exchanged satisfied looks. They felt like the luckiest people on the island. With the full moon shining brightly, the beach festivities hardly needed additional lighting. By 10 p.m., many partygoers were struggling to stay upright, as the open bars had left them too drunk. Alice's company was no exception, and they were feeling both tipsy and a bit overheated. Leo wouldn't leave Bella's side, and Alice wasn't thrilled about how Bella let him hug her. Sam tried unsuccessfully to make advances towards Alice and Maya, but they were firm in their rejection. They turned down every drunken man who made a move, knowing that dating a coworker was a bad idea. As midnight approached, the DJ played melodic techno, and the sensual beat really got the crowd moving on the sandy dance floor. Leo and Bella drifted away from the group towards the edge of the crowd. When they felt they were out of sight, Bella wrapped her arms around his neck, and he responded by pulling her closer, his hands resting on the small of her back. Adding to the mix of drinking, smoking, and dancing, Bella's heightened estrogen levels made her incredibly excited. She was ovulating, amplifying her arousal. At that moment, Bella stopped caring about Jules, Alice, Maya, or anyone else. Her sole focus was on releasing the pent-up sexual tension that had been building up inside her throughout the day. When Leo pressed his pelvis against her, she shuddered intensely, fearing she might climax right there on the beach. She turned to press her back against him, letting him wrap his arms around her hips. Bella pressed her back against Leo, letting him wrap his arms around her hips. He buried his nose in the back of her head, and she could feel his arousal. At some point, she couldn't stand it any longer. She grabbed his hand and led him down to the shore. Once they were far enough from the party and away from Alice's watchful eyes, she pounced on him with a hot, passionate kiss. "We won't go all the way," she thought. "We'll just satisfy each other this once and leave it at that." "Follow me," she whispered into Leo's ear, quickly heading toward the path leading to the stairs. He followed closely behind. She raced up the stairs without looking back, convincing herself that if she couldn't see anyone, they wouldn't see her either. Once they reached her room, breathless with anticipation, Bella fumbled with the magnetic card for the door. Her hands were trembling too much to manage it herself, so Leo took over. They both knew what was about to happen. As soon as the door closed behind them, they began to devour each other. Their kisses were intense and passionate. The admiration she saw in his eyes flattered her vanity. She dropped all pretense. They had sex, then had sex again and again. They tried every position imaginable, and she lost count of how many times she reached climax. The combination of drinking, smoking, dancing, and the relentless physical activity eventually took its toll. Exhausted, Bella collapsed onto the mattress and began to drift off to sleep. The next morning, Bella woke up with a pounding hangover, and Leo was nowhere to be found. At first, everything seemed like a blur. She struggled to understand her surroundings. The first coherent thought that pierced her headache was, "My marriage is over." This grim realization quickly spiraled into panic. Guilt and shame overwhelmed her. "What have I done?" She wanted to scream, but no sound came out. She tugged at her hair but lacked the strength. Rushing to the bathroom, she tried to vomit, but nothing came up. Thirsty, she drank rusty water straight from the sink faucet before collapsing back onto her bed. Wrapped in sheets, she wept bitterly. A dark thought struck her, and she dashed out onto the balcony. "Ugh, it's a slope," she thought. "I can't even kill myself properly." Desperate and broken, she returned to bed, lying there for hours, motionless. She imagined all possible scenarios, and in each one, Jules would eventually find out what had happened. Confessing seemed like the only option, but she feared he wouldn't forgive her. Even if he did, their relationship would never be the same. Jules would lose trust in her, and rightfully so. She couldn't even trust herself. She wondered if she could forgive Jules if their roles were reversed, and the answer was a painful no. At breakfast, Leo and Sam found they were no longer welcome at the girls' table. They were disappointed but didn't make a scene. That day, Alice and Maya rented a car and drove to Pink Beach, a landmark on the other side of the island. They debated whether to invite Bella but decided against it, assuming she needed solitude after missing breakfast and lunch. On the way, they picked up two young Italian travelers. Pink Beach was a half-hour walk from the nearest parking lot, but the effort was worth it. The pink sand was not only beautiful but also incredibly soft. On the return trip, they stopped at a vegan restaurant and got takeout for Bella, along with a couple of morning-after pills. At first, Bella wouldn't open the door for them. But after Maya nearly broke it down, Bella reluctantly let them in. She looked awful, disheveled hair, a swollen, tear-streaked face, and a stale odor indicating she hadn't showered since the day before. Alice and Maya pulled her into a long, comforting hug. After much persuasion, Bella agreed to shower and eat something, though she refused to join them in the dining room, not wanting to face curious glances or whispers. That night, unable to sleep and completely sober, Bella wrestled with her thoughts. Her mind raced with difficult questions and no answers. How would she tell Jules? What exactly would she reveal? How could she convince him it was a one-time mistake and that she was willing to do anything to make amends? After hours of mental anguish, she reached a painful decision. Being practical, she knew if losing her husband was inevitable, she had to move on despite the deep sorrow she felt. The next day at lunch, Alice and Maya were surprised to see Bella enter the dining room in a flowery sundress, looking radiant and smiling. She avoided eye contact with other diners. The meal went well, and she even joined them for the final beach party that evening. This time, however, she steered clear of drinking and smoking. At 2 a.m., Bella heard a gentle knock on her door. She hadn't slept at all. When she opened the door, she was taken aback to see Leo standing there all alone with a desperate expression. She simply shook her head and shut the door. The following day, Alice, Bella, and Maya waited quietly in line at the terminal to check in for their flight home. Meanwhile, Leo and Sam, who were behind them, chattered away, looking quite cheerful. Eventually, Alice couldn't stand it any longer. She turned around, gave Leo a piercing look, and told him that at breakfast, Leo and Sam were informed they were no longer welcome at the girls' table. They were visibly upset but kept their composure. Later that same day, Alice and Maya decided to rent a car and drive to Pink Beach, a famous spot on the other side of the island. They debated inviting Bella but opted not to, as she hadn't shown up for breakfast or lunch and they figured she needed some solitude. On the way, they picked up two young Italian travelers. Pink Beach was located in a remote area, requiring about a half-hour walk from the nearest parking lot. The effort was worthwhile. The pink sand was not only beautiful but also remarkably soft. On their return, they stopped at a vegan restaurant to get some takeout for Bella and even managed to grab a couple of morning pills for her. At first, Bella refused to open the door, but after Maya nearly forced it open, Bella finally let them in. She looked a mess. Her hair was disheveled, her face was swollen and red from crying, and she had a stale odor, suggesting she hadn't showered since the day before. Alice and Maya enveloped her in a long, comforting hug. It took a lot of persuasion, but eventually, Bella agreed to shower and eat something. Still, she flatly refused to join them in the dining room, not wanting to face the knowing glances or whispers. Completely sober and unable to sleep, Bella spent a grueling night, her mind racing with questions and no answers. How would she tell Jules? What should she reveal? How could she convince him it was a one-time mistake and that she was willing to do anything to make it right? After a night of mental turmoil, she made a painful decision. Being a practical person, she resolved to move on if she was destined to lose her husband, despite the deep sorrow she felt. The next day at lunch, Alice and Maya were astonished to see Bella enter the dining room in a vibrant sundress, looking stunning and smiling. However, she avoided making eye contact with the other diners. The meal went smoothly, and she even joined them for the final beach party that evening, though she stayed away from drinking and smoking. At 2 in the morning, Bella heard a soft knock on her door. She hadn't slept. When she opened the door, she was shocked to find Leo standing there alone, looking desperate. She shook her head and shut the door. The next day, Alice, Bella, and Maya stood quietly in line at the terminal to check in for their flight home. Leo and Sam were behind them, chatting away and looking cheerful. Eventually, Alice couldn't take it anymore and turned around, giving Leo a sharp look. "You seem awfully content for someone whose time is running out," she said. "You need to disappear as soon as the plane lands. Julian will take his time and make sure you suffer before he's done with you. With his connections, he might even confess to the murder and still walk free." Then she turned to Sam. "And you, Sam? He might think you were in on it too. I wouldn't be surprised if he's waiting for you at the airport when we land." Both men turned pale. They knew little about Julian's military past, but he was still the most intimidating person they'd ever encountered. Bella called Julian, insisting he not pick her up from the airport, as Alice would take her home. She figured Julian would sense something was wrong as soon as he saw her and didn't want to risk them being in danger on the side of the road. When Bella arrived home, Julian was in the kitchen preparing dinner. He dropped everything and rushed to hug and kiss her. He noticed something was off when she avoided his lips and offered her cheek instead. An hour later, they sat down for dinner in oppressive silence. The tension was almost unbearable. Finally, Bella broke the silence. "I have bad news," she said, her voice quivering. As Bella recounted the entire series of events tearfully, she held nothing back. She emphasized that this was an isolated incident, a result of alcohol, smoking, her menstrual cycle, and that she would do anything to earn his forgiveness and a second chance. She was practically begging. When she had said all she could, Julian stood up and gloomily asked, "You mentioned that Alice and Maya drank and smoked with you. Did any of them end up in bed with a coworker?" "No," but he didn't let her finish. He rushed into the bedroom and began packing his gym bag. "No," Bella shouted after him, "I'm the one who needs to leave." "Shut up," he hissed. When he finished packing, he headed for the front door, only to find Bella standing in his way. "Get out," he commanded. "No, please stay," she pleaded. He placed his large hand on her shoulder and effortlessly moved her aside. He was just about to open the door when Bella grabbed his hand with all her strength and began to whine. Her tears and anguish reached him, causing him to pause. As he stood there, Bella let go of his hand when she saw his broad shoulders shaking. She hesitated, raising her hand almost to his shoulder but stopping short, afraid to touch him. She wanted desperately to hold him close and never let go, but she knew that wouldn't solve anything. She realized that if he ever decided to come back to her, it needed to be because he genuinely wanted to, not merely as a reaction to her distress. He lingered for a moment, but eventually left. On his way to the motel, Julian suddenly changed his mind and turned around. He needed to hear another perspective on Bella's situation from someone he trusted, and he didn't want to be alone. When Alice let him into her apartment, a cup of coffee was already waiting for him. She confirmed everything Bella had told him and added some details of her own, like how Bella had turned down Leo the previous night. She mentioned that Bella had been crying non-stop for 2 days and that she had even worried about Bella's safety. Alice also urged Julian not to pursue Leo, suggesting he wasn't worth the trouble and that he might not even show up for work on Monday. Julian sat in silence for a long hour, staring gloomily at the floor. Finally, he stood up, went to the guest room, and locked the door behind him. Alice decided it wasn't the right time to press him for forgiveness or a decision. He needed space to process what he'd heard. The next day, at noon, Julian hadn't left the room and didn't answer Alice's knock. Alice placed a tray of food by the door and told him she was going to check on Bella. Bella was in even worse shape than she had been 2 days prior. It took Alice quite a while to convince her to eat and drink something. Thankfully, Bella was too weak and apathetic to resist as Alice dragged her into the bathroom. Once the door was shut behind them, Alice collapsed on the floor and started crying. The two people she cared about most were in such a terrible situation, and she felt powerless to help them. Julian had still not left the guest room when Alice returned from work the following day. She decided to prepare a special dinner, featuring all of his favorite vegetarian dishes along with a baked salmon. She felt a sense of satisfaction when she heard his bedroom door open and then the bathroom door close. He looked almost normal as he joined her at the dinner table, even smiling and chatting more than usual. After dinner, they settled in the living room with a bottle of wine. "What are you going to do?" Alice asked. "I'm going to get a divorce," Julian replied. "Isn't that a bit hasty? She cheated on me at the first chance she got. If you hadn't gotten those pills for her, she could be pregnant with someone else's child right now. She made a terrible mistake, but she's only human. She won't repeat it. Damn it, she will definitely do it again. Once a cheater, always a cheater. Do you really believe that cliché?" "Yes, I do. She'll never drink or smoke without you. I doubt she'll go anywhere other than work without you. It doesn't have to be the same situation, it just has to be the right one." Alice tilted her head and looked at him with a questioning gaze, but he just looked back meaningfully and smiled. "Everyone deserves a second chance," she said. "Not a third, but definitely a second. Bella deserves another chance. I'll throw her to the wolves myself if she slips up again. I've known her for 10 years. She's a good person, and she loves you very much. Even good people make mistakes. They don't deserve special treatment. I really think you're wrong about this. Not just about everyone, but especially about Bella. We all make critical mistakes when circumstances are right. Or wrong, I guess. Why didn't you and Maya make a mistake?" "Well, we're not married, so we couldn't make that particular mistake. But we certainly had fun, and I'm willing to bet we used protection." "Always bet on Alice, you won't miss," she said with a mischievous grin. "I have an idea, but I don't think you'll like it. Do you want to bet?" Bella was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner when Alice told her that Julian had decided to give her another chance and would be coming home that evening. When she heard the front door open, she turned around cautiously. At first, Julian stood at the entrance, looking tense. But as soon as he smiled at her, she dropped everything, ran up to him, jumped into his arms, wrapped her legs around his waist, and covered his face with kisses. He tried to avoid her affection like one avoids a loving puppy but simply patted her on the back. The dinner was pleasant, and Bella felt no discomfort. For the first time in a week, she felt happy and hopeful. That night, in bed, he politely rejected her advances. "It's too soon for me," he explained, and she understood. She didn't deceive herself into thinking that everything would return to normal right away. She held on with all the patience she could muster because she still had hope. Over the next few days, they enjoyed dinner outings, shopping trips, cuddled together on the couch every night, and even shared light kisses. Everything seemed to be looking up. However, on Friday night, Julian dropped a bombshell. As they snuggled on the sofa in front of the TV, Julian suddenly said, "I have bad news." Bella flinched and stared at him with wary eyes. "When Alice convinced me to give you another chance," he said coldly, still focused on the TV screen, "it was on the condition that you would understand my pain." Bella tilted her head in confusion. "The only way for us to move forward is if I get even." "I'm sorry, what?" Bella stammered. "I'm going to spend the weekend with Alice. If you can accept this, then maybe when I return, we can actually start over. She would never hurt me like this. She won't dare." That was my only condition, and she agreed. "I'll leave tomorrow evening and come back Sunday evening. Then we can continue." "No, please don't do this. It's madness. She's my best friend. Please don't do this to me. Julian stood up and went into the master bedroom, leaving Bella sobbing on the couch. She eventually managed to fall asleep, convincing herself it was all just a cruel test. They're just trying to see how far they can push me, she told herself. This is just some vile revenge. Nothing will actually happen between them. The next evening, Bella watched her husband pack his gym bag in their bedroom. She whispered one last plea, no need. She ran to the living room window and watched as he got into the car and drove away. Part of her still clung to the hope that it was all just a terrible joke. But when she saw him drive off, she grabbed her keys and hurried to her car. As Julian entered the lobby of Alice's house, Bella arrived and parked by the sidewalk. She looked up at the windows of Alice's apartment and saw the dim light in the living room grow brighter. Shadows flickered on the walls. About 20 minutes later, the lights in the living room went out, and the bedroom lights came on. A minute later, the entire apartment was shrouded in darkness. Bella thought she saw the curtains in the dark bedroom move, but she couldn't be sure. Her anguished scream went unheard as she drove home, tears streaming down her face. At first, she tried to convince herself this was the price she had to pay for her betrayal and attempted to distract herself. It was futile. Her thoughts kept returning to her husband and her best friend. She imagined them together in bed, Alice's ecstatic cries, and her husband's adoring gaze as he looked at Alice. Her self-torture spiraled into pure madness. At one point, she even considered taking one of Julian's guns and shooting them both, but she knew he had taken the key to the safe with him. He always did. Yes, I messed up big time, she said out loud with disgust. But not with my fucking best friend, who also happens to be an ex. She tried calling Julian's mobile, but he didn't answer. She then called Alice, but the calls went straight to voicemail. She even tried Maya, with no success. Bella was too distraught to notice how late it was. Each failed call felt like another blow, a part of the conspiracy against her. In utter despair, she called Leo. He arrived quickly and behaved like a true gentleman. He listened patiently to her desperate cries and explanations, offering her a glass of water. As she settled on his lap, trembling, he gently patted her shoulder. When she calmed down a bit, he kissed the top of her head soothingly, assuring her that everything would be okay. Seeing that the first kiss had helped, he kissed her on the cheek. He didn't resist when she suddenly kissed him passionately. In the bedroom, they relived their previous night together, but this time it was even more exhilarating and satisfying. For Bella, it was the ultimate revenge sex, and nothing was hotter. After the third round, they both collapsed onto the sheets and fell into a deep, sweet sleep. Later, Bella woke from her slumber when the bedroom light came on. Why does he have to turn on the light when he goes to pee? She thought. She turned over and felt a hand touch her body. If he's in bed, who turned on the light? She wondered in horror. Propping herself up on her elbows, she squinted at the figures in the light. After a few agonizing seconds, her eyes adjusted, and she saw Julian and Alice standing at the foot of the bed, staring at her naked body. Alice looked furious, while Julian's expression was a mix of pity and disgust, as if you were observing a gazelle being torn apart by a hyena. "You owe me $500, Julian said to Alice. "Yes, I know," Alice responded coldly. "You were right. I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes."